Good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, March the 9th. Welcome to this special meeting of the Charles County Board of Education. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to thank all board members for being able to attend at such short notice. Ms. Morley, for those of the public that are viewing, she is with us virtually, so the entire board is present. At this time, I'd like to call Mr. Schwartz, please.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
We're here to discuss a bill that was introduced in Annapolis and amended just this week. Looking for a position from the board on House Bill 119. Title of the bill is County Boards of Education Curriculum Guides and Courses of Study Requirements. The bill initially was filed to deal with the comprehensive health education program in the state. The bill was amended by the House Ways and Means Committee to do much more than what it was initially intended to do. And now in its current form, what the bill does is to give the State Board of Education virtually full control over local curriculum issues, including giving the state superintendent the authority to withhold state funding if we, in his judgment, don't follow the state guidelines. It's a very dangerous bill in a sense because it makes a radical change to what is currently the circumstance where the state sets standards and local boards of education determine curriculum. This is a bill that we would suggest that we oppose. The superintendent's recommendation is to oppose, and I suggest that the board do so.
So thank you, Mr. Schwartz. If the board will recall, we got a brief update on this at our last board meeting, and as Mr. Schwartz has indicated, the bill has changed since then. It is extremely overarching. This board, and I would dare say every board in the state, has as one of its continuing stances to have local control over their curriculum in their school system. So, as Mr. Schwartz indicated, this is very overreaching, and I thought it was important enough that we as a board meet to discuss and take a position. And I did forward the email that came from me to all of you, so hopefully you had a chance to read that.
All right, and the bill right now is on the floor of the House, meaning the House is considering it on final passage. Once it passes the House, it will then go to the Senate, of course, and go through the Senate process. So it's right now on the House, it's called the House floor. It's on the floor of the House. It's passed out of the House Ways and Means Committee, so it's pretty far along in the House side.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. We really needed to get together as soon as possible because in all likelihood it'll come for a full vote before we meet again on Tuesday. So I know it's a lot to digest. Before I ask for a motion, is there any questions for Mr. Schwartz? Yes, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas. Just curious, the legislature has typically been kind of local control, an advocate of local control. So I'm just curious kind of why this staunch deviation at this point. Do you have any background in terms of why they're advocating for this level of state control over local matters?
I wish I could tell you exactly what they're thinking. It's my understanding that this bill is being strongly supported by the state superintendent of schools. The initial reason for House Bill 119 was to deal with health curriculum and the concern that some school systems in the state were not following what the state standards were, which was a bill that MABE and PZAM, the State Superintendent Association, the State Boards of Education Association, they were opposed because they generally oppose curriculum matters, and in Annapolis, they don't want the General Assembly to control that. So they did oppose House Bill 119 in its original form. Subsequent to the hearing, at some point, the Ways and Means Committee decided to accept what Mr. Chaudhary, the State Superintendent, wanted them to do, which was to go a little further than just the health curriculum concern and deal with all curriculum across the board. And so for whatever reasons, individually, the Ways and Means Committee agreed with that position.
Okay. Ms. Butler Washington. And
When you sent me the bill, Chairman Lucas, I did call Delegate Patterson, who is the chair of that committee, and got some history behind this because I wanted to know why also. I think it was a couple of counties who do not even teach the curriculum is what was the problem. And they wanted to ensure that all of the students get the same education. And no school has jurisdiction to say, I'm not gonna teach I'm not gonna take this curriculum or this curriculum. So since the MABE or doesn't have control over the school boards, the fact of legislation could have control over that program to do it, to make sure that it is instituted and is taught. Because I think, and they're thinking on the outer counter of it because of all the things have happened outside of that, meaning that Ray versus Roe has been changed. And now states are saying that they're banning this. So they want to make sure that every child is educated on this issue. So that was my understanding of it. It's not that they wanted to dictate curriculum, because I wanted to make sure that that was not the case either, because then that is really overreaching. So I just wanted to get some background on why they went so far. And she stated that it's only this curriculum, not the rest of it's just this one, the health one, that they are doing this with, not the other curriculums that they're doing it with.
And I appreciate that perspective from Delegate Patterson. She is on the Ways and Means Committee, which passed this bill. The bill, as initially filed, seemed to do what she is suggesting concerning the health curriculum, and it was just focused on the health curriculum. The way that the bill's been amended, though, it goes beyond that to all curriculum across the board. And so that goes beyond just the one issue that was initially at the concern of the sponsor. The concern about this particular bill and the way it's set up is not only does the state take over curriculum from locals, but the state superintendent can withhold state funding if the state superintendent believes that the local board is not following the state curriculum as he thinks it should be followed. And although the state superintendent does have the expertise and the position and the authority to make decisions over public education, certainly, that's a decision-making authority that he's never had before. And it's an authority to withhold funding that we've never had before in state law. So we're concerned that the way this is set up goes well beyond what the initial intent of this bill was.
Okay. And then, I saw your hand, Ms. Warren, but can we go to Ms. Moore-Lee and then Ms. Warren, please?
Yes, thank you for the background and the history, Mr. Schwartz. And you hit the nail on the head for me as far as my concern about the withholding of the funding, because, you know, as I understand it, it seems fairly subjective. And even if there aren't any particular concerns with this General Assembly and this superintendent, you know, projecting 4, 6, 8 years down the road, it may look very different. And and perhaps you can explain to me, is there any recourse if there is some kind of issue or dispute between the local school board and the state superintendent around, you know, whether the local school board feels that they are following the curriculum, you know, as instructed, and there's a disagreement with the superintendent, you know, and he decides to withhold funding. Is there any recourse in that instance, to your knowledge? That's very, very troubling for me.
Sure. I appreciate that question. The bill does not set up any appeal process whatsoever. So the only appeal process, in a sense, would be to file an injunction in state court, in a circuit court, which is something that would be a dangerous thing for a local board to then go to circuit court to see if they can overturn the decision of the state superintendent. That's not something that is typically done, and that's not something we'd want to do. We would not want to set up a system where our only recourse is to go to court and file an injunction in court. But there's no appeal process otherwise set up in the bill. The state superintendent has final word on whether the curriculum is being followed or not.
All right, thank you. Ms. Warren.
Hi, thank you. And this question may be for another conversation, but I'm just curious to know, what do we have in place already that holds us or the teachers accountable for actually teaching the curriculum? How do we is something in place already
Yeah. I
I'm
think
happy to-
Superintendent can speak to that.
I'm happy to take that question. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that the state oversees the supervision of the curriculum and making sure that the standards are implemented. At the high school level, we actually send to the state our course codes, and every LEA has the same course codes that must be sent forward, and the state has to approve them in our sequence of classes. We have some flexibility with the curriculum materials that we purchase, but we don't have flexibility in terms of the standards that have to be taught, which is what the state sets forth. The state superintendent does that. And we have different ways in which we are audited, and we create reports to the state to talk about how we are teaching the standards. The other thing is we have an accountability system that's built on standards, on meeting the standards. So we are held accountable via all of our assessments around that accountability piece. So that's sort of the structure that we are in now in terms of accountability for all content areas with MSD, with the state superintendent.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hancock.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz, for your update. I want to make a couple remarks, and then I do have a question for you. I do believe this is a huge overreach from Annapolis. This will be my 5th year on the board, and every year it seems like something comes out that takes a little bit of control away from us. And I fear it gets to the point to where we're just going to be people sitting here taking the brunt from the public, from the actions that Annapolis enacts. And there's a reason we are in the position that we're in, and that is to listen to the voices of the public, take the state curriculum and try to enact it as best we can under the way it was intended. But I've always been a supporter of local control, and I can certainly not support this. And as Mr. Schwartz mentioned, if you look at all the stuff that's crossed out on here, all of that is the health curriculum, and then it starts stating established curriculum guidelines and course of study for schools, and it's all curriculum. So, Mr. Schwartz, I do have a question. If the General Assembly were to pass this, how hard would it be for a parent to opt out of a certain piece of curriculum in a school if they felt that it wasn't appropriate for their child?
It would be up to the State Board of Education to set forth regulations when students can opt out of the curriculum that they're mandating. So they would just determine when students and parents can opt out. So it's not clear at this point what standards the State Board would establish throughout the curriculum and those.
But, thank you. And essentially, we wouldn't have hardly any control over that, correct?
Likely not.
Thank you.
The bill says that if we allow a student to opt out when they're not, it's not approved by the State Board, that's a reason for the state superintendent to withhold funding. That's in the bill.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith.
So just a clarifying question. So one, appreciate the comments of Member Hancock. But wanting to piggyback off of, why am I blanking on everyone's name today? Today is not a name day. But wanting to figure out, you mentioned, Superintendent, that the state superintendent already sets the standards for the curriculum, I believe the health curriculum specifically. I'm trying to understand what they're trying to control for. If the standards are already set across the entirety of the state, I understand that different counties and different locales may have different ways of implementing it, but the standards are the standards. So what exactly is Annapolis trying to legislate more of?
Well, so initially the bill there was already a framework for health. And within what the state, what MSD put out was really a framework. And part of the framework for portions of the family life planning portion of the framework, there's a way in which there can be options for families. to opt out of certain things. And there's also guidance on if you opt out, then what do you do? What is it that you are going to be taught? Which other things can you be taught? If you recall, we are requesting time to come to the board. Matt Galanka's here, and he's been leading a broad range, diverse group within our community to work through those specifics, to look at the instructional materials, to look at the alternative options that the state already provides families options for, and really come to the board with some recommendations on how to move forward for your adoption of curriculum. I think the shift here is first and foremost that this has completely changed to be every content area. So for example, let's just take our reading program. So we have to meet certain standards, there's state standards, and our instructional materials that we purchase must meet those state standards, and so we need to make sure that our program does do that. It could be that if, and we have flexibility right now, we come to you, to the board, to approve instructional materials, curricular materials for approval, and we present to you why these are tied to the standard. I think this bill limits your responsibility in that process and takes it from your responsibility to approve local instructional materials or curricular materials to meet the standard, and instead leaves it at the legislative level, at the state legislative level, and could result in narrowing the options of instructional materials to meet those standards. And I think that is some of the elevated concern in terms of how that impacts the role of local school boards and their roles in the school system.
Thank you for that breakdown. That was very helpful.
I got one more question.
Just 1 second. Did you have, Ms. Creamer?
I do. I was just waiting to hear from everyone because some of you had some of my same questions. So thank you, Mr. Schwartz, for providing all of that background information. I do have a question, though, and maybe the superintendent may be able to answer this, but what currently, because there is a framework already at the state level, or the state superintendent has established for local boards to follow, what are the current consequences or, I don't know, consequences, the only word I can come up with, if we don't establish curriculum guidelines or choose curriculum materials currently that the state has provided a framework for? Is there ever a situation where you come before the local board and you say, okay, this is the curriculum that we've chosen and these are the materials that we've chosen based on the framework that the state provided, and if the local board does approve it, is there ever a situation where the state board could now get involved and say, no, that doesn't meet the standards that we've set for you, or we're not satisfied with the materials that you've selected? Is that something that would occur today? And if so, what would that look like?
So, to be perfectly honest, I've never gone beyond the school systems that I worked in Maryland, and I have now worked in 3 school systems in Maryland. I've had experiences, and I used to be a chief academic officer, so curriculum is my baby. I've had experiences where we have submitted back to the state and they've said, you haven't quite achieved it. And we frankly rushed to make sure that we did achieve it. So, and it hasn't gone sort of beyond that. But there is a recourse of accountability perhaps that is felt by staff bringing anything forward to the board for approval that the state says, yes, it meets the state standards. And so I know that, at least in the 3 school systems where I worked, the current structure does, give some level of flexibility to the local jurisdictions to make some site-based decisions. And overall, it has resulted in people wanting to make sure that they meet the standard and they don't bring anything forward. I will say that when school systems went through and applied for the LEADS grant, and if you recall, and you might recall previous presentations, but we came to the board and talked about the LEADS grant, which is a grant unto itself. We did have to meet certain requirements within the LEADS grant to receive additional support for specific ways of like teaching the reading program so that our materials and so forth were aligned to the science of reading. Regardless, we were going to align ourselves to that anyways, and we're coming forward to you with a deeper presentation. But it was, as a grant, an incentive to get school systems across the state to align to specific ways of selecting materials and teaching methodologies, if you will, in reading. But overall, most of the time when the state standards are revised and we went from the common, you know, we had the Common Core state standards and they were adopted and everything else, we did have to submit verification back to the state, and we would feel an internal pressure to make sure that we did meet those requirements. We didn't go beyond that.
Okay, thank you for that. That's kind of what I was looking for. So it sounds like there's already a good amount of accountability on behalf of the local boards to follow the standards that are set forth by the state board. So I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Hancock that this seems like it's just taking it a little bit too far, kind of tightening the wrench on local boards and saying you have to do it and you have to do it in this way and with these materials and, down to sort of every last detail. So it does kind of take away a lot of the autonomy that local boards have. So I appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Butler-Washington and then Ms. Warren.
I'm looking at this as I did some more research on this because there's a lot of information on the website about this. Also, a lot of the counties really up in the mountains and stuff are just not teaching the curriculum, and so they are taking their money, but they're okay with it. But is it okay for the students? And I'm looking at this and thinking that the superintendent is thinking that if we are setting boundaries, but schools are still saying, you could take my money, I'm not going to teach the children this curriculum, is that okay? So is it they taking my right away, or he's looking at the overall picture and saying that all the kids are supposed to be equitable taught, not some. And if I leave a blind eye to it, who am I helping? Charles County, we're doing a great job of doing it. So we don't have an issue with it. So is it we taking a side on it for who? Because we are following the curriculum. So if we, to me, taking a position, if we're following the curriculum and we're not doing any of these things, it's not for us to get involved. This is for the people who are not doing the curriculum. So I don't want to help the people who are not doing our students, the students that are not here in Charles County, a disservice, because they are still the future. So we have to look at the bigger picture of this whole thing. Because as I said, superintendent said that we are doing everything we're doing. We never had a problem with it at all, the standards or anything. And for them taking a curriculum away from us and saying that what we can do or what we can't do, I don't think he necessarily talking to the schools who are doing it. It's the school who are not doing it. That's who he's directing this legislation to.
Right, and I appreciate that. I think that there may be some school systems that the state superintendent is more concerned about than others. I agree with that. And I think the way to address that is to address it with those particular school systems. I think Ms. Moore-Lee made a great point earlier that this state superintendent may be somebody that agrees with what we're doing. The next state superintendent may come in and say, you know what, Charles County, I don't think you're doing the right thing, and they may try to change everything we are doing. And so giving the state superintendent it's not a Mr. Chaudhry issue, it's a state superintendent issue. Giving the state superintendent the authority to direct local curriculum across the board, all curriculum across the state, to address some concerns that may be in some counties currently, we think is the wrong approach to take. And that's why we're recommending to oppose this bill.
Okay. Ms. Warren?
I just have one quick question. Does the state provide any evidence-based curriculums or like suggested list of, hey, curriculums you should get, and do we purchase those? Or have we?
Yes, and depends on the various areas they do. They don't tend to provide too many of them because, to be honest, there is impartial organizations that nationally we look at when we do curriculum adoptions. And so those are important to go to and do the alignment. But I will tell you that when we applied for the grant, that we applied for the LEADS grant, I mean, the state reviewed our entire reading our core curriculum and our interventions. And, you know, again, we didn't have any issues. But the state does provide some guidance. They've never really said you must use this particular curriculum. And I would say if you go to some of the national sites that we use to see where the alignment and where the strength of the various publishers are, and how it aligns to our state standards, there may be a couple options that bubble up. Because frankly, there's a lot of money tied to publishers. And so we always go by the non-affiliated parties that are not tied to publishers to make some decisions on selection of instructional materials. And we have to do our due diligence around that. But the state will, from time to time, advise on some areas, but they also know that they use the same thing. They use a third party. They want school systems to use an unbiased third party that just looks at the strength of the curriculums that are out there.
Okay, and this is across all content areas, including health education?
Well, there's some content areas that are stronger, so your typical 4, English, math, science, and social studies have more of that structured. Sometimes there may not be a lot of options and a lot of really good options in vendor-led curriculum, and that sometimes generated for school systems to develop their own. That happened right as the transition of the Common Core standards came through. Everybody just put a sticker saying, oh, we're Common Core aligned, and not everybody was. So it just depends on the content areas. There's obviously more for the 4 core content areas. There's more of options. But when we come to present to you specifically on the health curriculum, we will talk about the selection because we're coming forward. Again, we did this in committee, so this isn't just the curriculum people. We brought in a lot of we brought in students, families, and then we brought parents, community members from a wide range perspectives around health education to look at the instructional materials that we think are the best ones to meet the standards and provide options, because that's what the state provides to families that are really rigorous.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Smith?
So just briefly, to Ms. Butler-Washington's question, well, her statement, I think I definitely agree with sort of reading between the lines in terms of this seems to be like a sledgehammer they're trying to take to an issue that's for only a few nails, and it's not specific to Charles County. I know that we are voting specific to Charles County's issues. I'm curious if, I'm sure the state superintendent has this right to essentially change or modify the standards for health or any other area of content if he or the state superintendent, if he is seeing that there are challenges where other counties or other jurisdictions are not fully purchasing curriculum and instructional materials that truly align to the standards that were set or kind of are missing components or areas of it. I'm sure it's within his authority to also enhance the standards just to ensure that all the counties adhere to them. Is that correct?
What I can tell you is that for example, through the LEADS grants, there were school systems that did not receive funding for additional, we are using it for professional development, additional instructional materials for interventions. There were some school systems in our state that did not receive funding because there was not a shown alignment to the science of reading in their approach to their reading programs.
But for spaces where it's not discretionary, for spaces where it's required to things to be taught, I mean, for instance, we're talking about health and other curricular areas. So for health, every county has to teach health in some form or fashion. So I'm sure it's within the state superintendent's right to enhance the standards for health specifically, just to ensure that all the counties kind of align to it. So if Charles County is doing the right thing, it's perhaps not looking at Charles County, but the other counties that are not, and finding ways of enhancing the standards across the board to ensure we all rise in the same way.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if the issue is enhancing the standard. I think the issue of accountability is really the issue, because I think the standards are there. I reviewed the framework a lot, and we had a lot of conversations of understanding the framework. The framework, the state already offered an option. I personally think that the newer piece of legislation that has been revised is really not about the health curriculum. It's actually about other content areas, perhaps even reading and math and so forth and so on. I think that's the interest, because again, the health curriculum, there were some LEAs, and I think it's public knowledge, that had some concerns about the health framework as it stood. The state wrote it in a way that does offer options. It'll be for you to determine the deepness of it when we come forward and present to you. Our approach was always get the community, the entire community, to come in and learn about it, and give guidance to then give a proposal back to you about how to move forward that is inclusive of all the students, but also meets the requirements of the state. I don't think this is about enhancing the standard necessarily, because the state absolutely is responsible for and can always come in and produce the new set of standards for any content area for the state. I think this is a question more around accountability and I guess some of the things that Ms. Morley queued up around funding for the LEAs and local control.
Thank you.
So the initial bill was proposed on health, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
And now they're switching it to everything, the whole curriculum? Okay,
Correct.
all right. Thank you.
Right. Sure thing. Okay. At this time, the chair will seek a motion, and after the motion, there can be more discussion, but the chair will seek a motion to oppose House Bill 119. Is there a motion?
Motion to oppose.
Made by
Second.
Ms. Thomas, seconded by Mr. Hancock. Is there any discussion? From any? Yes, Ms. Butler-Washington.
I just say my last thing is, I just don't think the state superintendent, if he get out of hand, our legislator would be the quickest to pull it from him. So, again, this is not a Charles County fight. This is counties that are not being accountable to their students. And they have to do something to ensure that the students are getting educated. So if this is, if we are doing the right thing, we don't have to worry about him coming and doing anything to us, because we're doing the right thing. So standing with people who are not doing the right thing, to me, do a disservice to the students. That's what I have to say about it, because it's equitable.
Okay, any other comments? Mr. Hancock?
Mr. Lucas,
Yes.
may I make a quick point?
Sure, Ms. Morley, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you fine.
Hello?
Yes, Ms. Morley, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. It froze for a minute. I just wanted to say that if my concern is if we voluntarily give up this level of control, we won't get it back. I don't see this, simultaneously down the road being recalled or reduced. And essentially, in my opinion, the curriculum, outside of whatever the state mandates are, is set by the superintendent. The superintendent is hired by the Board of Education. The Board of Education is elected by the people. So I think that the people speak when we select the superintendent. by them electing us. And so I think that the local control, I agree with Mr. Hancock, is very important, and it speaks to the community that we're serving. And if there are already controls in place, as the superintendent mentioned, around not receiving grant funding, I don't see how we can, in good conscience, voluntarily give up this level of control. Again, not understanding what the future may hold, who the superintendent may be down the road, who the members of the General Assembly may be down the road. And it is not easy to then walk this back. So that's my final point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morley. Mr. Hancock.
Thank you, Chairman. And I certainly appreciate Ms. Butler-Washington's comments. But I would add, you know, I do believe this would affect everyone and would affect us. I'll use an example. We've talked about health curriculum a lot just because that's what this original bill was designed to focus on, but it does focus on everything. But let's say, you know, in a couple months, the committee that has discussed the health curriculum is going to come before us, and we may or may not adopt some procedures on how to proceed with the health curriculum. If this passes, it's very broad in certain areas, where to the point where the state could come and say, hey, you know, this is the curriculum we said that we're going to teach, no ifs, ands, or buts. You know, we kind of go down a road to where not just the health curriculum, but every curriculum, to me, it seems like it's going to be under a microscope, to where we're really going to be looked at much harder than we are now. And then you talk about running the risk of losing state funding. That's a big deal. And I think it certainly could apply to us. So, thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments? All right, I have a couple of comments, and I appreciate, again, everyone coming out on short notice. You know, having been here a while, I've seen things like this, and as has been mentioned by my fellow board members, you know, things like this, it makes you think how our legislatures in Annapolis in general view the Board of Education, because, you know, I think it's fair to say that we have the closest connection with the people in the county and the school system as a whole. And again, I appreciate my board members' comments, but you just can't think of who is here now. You have to think of any other person that might be in positions of power in the future. And the dynamic between the state superintendent, who was hired under a previous administration, and then the administration that we have now, and then the legislature, I mean, there's a lot of quite frankly, egos that clash, and unfortunately, it comes down to the LEAs that have to take the brunt of when they want to swing a hammer, and it's just, it's not fair. It's not fair in my opinion. So I wanted to make that clear, and at this time now, I will read the motion. The motion is to oppose House Bill 119. It was made by Ms. Thomas and seconded by Mr. Hancock. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Ms. Warren, yes. Ms. Thomas, yes. Ms. Smith, yes. Ms. Creamer, yes. Mr. Hancock, yes. Myself, yes. And Ms. Abujamah, yes. And Ms. Morley.
Ms. Morley, yes.
Ms. Morley, yes. All those opposed? Opposed is Ms. Butler-Washington. Thank you very much. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Made by Ms. Creamer, seconded by Ms. Smith. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That vote is unanimous. Thank you all very much for coming out again. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.